At 0930 hours on June 9, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. was in the cockpit of his P-47 Thunderbolt at Ramitelli Airfield, Italy, preparing for a mission that would become a turning point. 39 P-47s, all with bright red tails, were lining up for what would be the 332nd Fighter Group's most crucial escort mission. At 31, Davis was in charge of the only all-black fighter group in the United States Army Air Forces. He had graduated from West Point in 1936, enduring 4 years of complete social isolation. No white cadet had spoken to him except when required. He ate every meal alone and had no roommate. The Academy attempted to break his spirit with silence, but Davis stood firm. Now, as a commander, he led his group into battle. The briefing that morning was clear. Escort B-24 Liberators of the 5th Bombardment Wing to Munich, Germany. Protect them from enemy aircraft and bring them home. The 5th Air Force had suffered heavy bomber losses, with an average of 46 bombers shot down on missions like this one. Davis understood that challenge-heavy bombers were slow, heavily armed targets. Flying in tight formations at 25,000 feet, they headed deep into enemy territory to strike strategic targets. The Luftwaffe would send up waves of fighters to intercept them, while American fighter escorts often failed to stay with the bombers. Instead, fighters would engage the enemy and pursue them, leaving the bombers exposed. Davis had a different plan. His pilots would stay with the bombers, protecting them from any immediate threat, and would not chase enemy aircraft. His motto was discipline over aggression, protection over pursuit, and the mission was clear: bring the bombers home. The 99th Fighter Squadron, deployed to North Africa in April 1943. They arrived at Wedinja Airfield in French Morocco on April 24th. Equipped with Curtiss P-40 Warhawk fighters. Though capable, the P-40s were outdated compared to the latest German fighters. The squadron was attached to the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William Mummier, who showed no faith in black pilots. He segregated the 99th from the white squadrons and denied them experienced flight leaders for their first missions. On June 2, 1943, the 99th's first combat mission took place over the Mediterranean Sea. It was the first time any pilot from the squadron encountered enemy fire, and they had no experienced pilots to guide them. The 99th moved to Tunisia, then Sicily, supporting Allied ground forces, escorting bombers and patrolling coastlines. On July 2, 1943, First Lieutenant Charles Hall made history by shooting down a German fighter while escorting B-25 Mitchell bombers. This victory was the first aerial kill by a black American military pilot. General Dwight Eisenhower personally congratulated Hall, but victories were few and far between. The squadron continued flying dangerous and exhausting missions throughout the summer and fall of 1943. They flew support missions during the invasion of Sicily, patrolled, escorted bombers, and attacked enemy ground positions. Despite their hard work, Colonel Meare remained hostile. In September 1943, he reported that the 99th had underperformed, which was forwarded to Major General Edwin House of the 12th Air Support Command. House issued a memorandum on September 16, 1943. Claiming that the squadron was not of the fighting caliber expected and criticized the black pilot's reflexes. This memorandum reached the War Department, threatening to end the Tuskegee experiment. Meanwhile, Davis had returned to the United States in September 1943 to take command of the 332nd Fighter Group. Upon learning about the memorandum, Davis immediately traveled to Washington to defend his pilots. He presented strong evidence to the War Department and held a press conference at the Pentagon. He argued that the 99th had not received any special treatment, that they had been assigned difficult missions with little support, and had performed as well as could be expected under those conditions. He emphasized that Meare's report was driven by prejudice, not factual evidence. In response, the War Department commissioned a study, which was completed in March 1944. The study thoroughly examined the 99th's combat record and found that their performance was comparable to other squadrons in the theater. It acknowledged the squadron's unique challenges due to segregation and the lack of support from their group commander. The study ultimately recommended the continuation and expansion of the Tuskegee program. Meare's attempt to shut down black aviation was unsuccessful. Then came the pivotal moment at Anzio. On January 27 and 28, 1944, 15 pilots from the 99th engaged a large force of German fighters over the beachhead. Flying the outdated P-40 Warhawks against superior Focke-Wulf 190s, they shot down 13 enemy aircraft in 2 days without losing a single pilot. Captain Charles Hall destroyed 2 German planes on January 28, earning the Distinguished Flying Cross. The report advocating for the 99th's removal was quietly dismissed. Meanwhile, in the United States, the Army was forming more black fighter squadrons. The 100th Fighter Squadron was activated in February 1942, followed by the 3001st in October 1942 and the 3002nd in March 1943. In October 1943, these 3 squadrons merged to form the 332nd Fighter Group, with Lieutenant Colonel Davis as the commanding officer. The group trained at Selfridge Field, Michigan, through late 1943. They received Bell P-39 Airacobra fighters, which were effective for ground attack but not suited for air-to-air combat. In December 1943, the 332nd deployed to Italy, arriving at Monte Carino Airfield near Salerno in February 1944. The 99th, still operating separately, was delayed but eventually joined the 332nd in June 1944. By this time, Davis commanded 4 squadrons, the 99th, 100th, 3001st, and 3002nd, and the 332nd was fully operational. On June 8, 1944, they received orders for their first heavy bomber escort mission. Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. was born on December 18, 1912. In Washington, D.C., his father, Benjamin O. Davis, Sr., was one of only 2 black combat officers in the U.S. Army at the time and would later become the Army's first black general in October 1940. Growing up in a military family, Davis was keenly aware of both the importance of service and the barriers imposed by segregation. At 13, Davis attended an air show at Bowling Field in Washington where a pilot offered him a ride. That experience ignited his passion for military aviation despite the many obstacles he would face due to his race. Davis attended Central High School in Cleveland, Ohio, where his father was stationed, graduating in 1929 as the class valedictorian. After brief studies at Western Reserve University and the University of Chicago, Davis received a nomination to the United States Military Academy at West Point from Illinois Congressman Oscar Depriest, the only black member of Congress at the time. In July 1932, Davis entered West Point as the first black cadet in the 20th century. His time at the academy was marked by systematic isolation. White cadets ignored him except when military protocol required interaction. He had no roommate and ate every meal alone at a table for 10. Exclusion from social activities was routine, and the academy's culture tried to force him out through a practice known as silencing, a form of hazing meant to break cadets who were unwanted by the institution. Davis refused to yield. He focused on his studies, trained hard, and adhered to every regulation. In June 1936, he graduated 35th in his class of 276. becoming West Point's fourth black graduate in its history. Davis graduated from West Point in 1936, the first black cadet in nearly 50 years. He was eager to fly but faced rejection from the Army Air Corps, as no black flying units existed and no positions were available for black officers in aviation. He was assigned to the 24th Infantry Regiment, a Buffalo Soldier unit at Fort Benning, Georgia, where racial discrimination kept him from entering the Base Officers Club. In June 1937, Davis attended infantry school at Fort Benning. 2 years later, in 1939, he was reassigned to teach military tactics at Tuskegee Institute, Alabama, the same assignment his father had held years earlier. The Army used this post to keep black officers away from commanding white troops. However, in 1941, everything changed. President Franklin Roosevelt, under pressure from civil rights organizations and black newspapers, ordered the War Department to create a black flying unit. The Pittsburgh Courier had launched a double V campaign advocating for victories both abroad and against racism at home. Civil rights groups argued that if the U.S. was fighting for democracy abroad, it had to practice it at home. Roosevelt, needing black votes in the upcoming election, pushed the military to act, and the War Department, reluctantly, complied. In March 1941, the Army activated the 99th Pursuit Squadron at Chanute Field, Illinois, before moving them to Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama for flight training. The Tuskegee Institute was chosen because it had a civilian pilot training program and the Army contracted it for support. The military leaders who opposed integration expected the program to fail, believing black men lacked the intelligence and reflexes to fly high-performance fighters. A 1925 War College study had concluded that black soldiers were inherently inferior, and many senior officers still held this belief in 1941. They hoped the Tuskegee program would prove these assumptions. But the experiment did not fail. The first class of aviation cadets, Class 42 CSA, began training in July 1941. Among them was Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., an experienced officer with 5 years of service but no flying experience. Along with him were Second Lieutenants Charles Dow, Jr., M. Ross, Lem Custis, and Captain George Roberts. On March 6, 1942, all 5 graduated, becoming the first black military pilots in American history. The Army needed a black West Point graduate to command the squadron, and Davis was the only active black Academy graduate. In July 1942, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel and named commander of the 99th Pursuit Squadron. The squadron continued training through 1942, flying North American AT-6 Texan trainers and Curtiss P-40 Warhawk fighters. As more classes graduated and more pilots earned their wings, by early 1943, the 99th had enough trained pilots and support personnel to deploy overseas. The 332nd Fighter Group flew P-47 Thunderbolts on early escort missions, transitioning to North American P-51 Mustangs in July 1944, which revolutionized their capabilities. The Mustang, one of the finest fighters ever built, could reach speeds exceeding 440 miles per hour and, with drop tanks, had a combat radius of over 750 miles, allowing the 332nd to escort bombers across the Mediterranean theater. The Mustang was armed with 6.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, and its handling made it a superb dogfighter, particularly against German Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s. When the Mustangs arrived, the ground crews painted their tail sections bright red. Continuing the tradition from the P-47s, the red tails were easy to spot in the crowded skies over Europe, allowing bomber crews and fighter pilots to quickly identify friend from foe. Davis had specific tactical doctrines for his pilots. which he repeatedly briefed them on before each mission. Their primary responsibility was bomber protection, not pursuing aerial victories. While other fighter groups, under General Jimmy Doolittle's direction, were encouraged to aggressively hunt down German fighters, Davis believed the 332nd needed a different approach. His group was being judged by higher standards than any white unit, and any failure would be used to claim black pilots were inadequate. Excellence was essential, and Davis made it clear that his pilots' primary goal was to bring bombers home safely. They were to engage only German fighters threatening the bomber formations and fight aggressively when necessary. But the 332nd pilots stuck to their mission. They would not abandon their positions to chase enemy aircraft away from the bombers. If a German fighter broke off an attack and fled, they were to let it go, return to formation, and be ready for the next assault. This doctrine, while essential for the mission's success, frustrated some pilots. Fighter pilots traditionally valued aerial victories as a way to prove their skills. 5 kills made you an ace, a title that brought respect and recognition. But Davis remained steadfast in his approach, telling his pilots that every bomber they protected meant 10 American men went home safely. The lives of those airmen were more important than individual accolades. Bomber protection was their top priority. Everything else came second. On June 8, 1944, the 332nd carried out their first heavy bomber escort mission to Pola, Italy. 39 P-47 Thunderbolts escorted B-17 bombers of the 5th Bombardment Wing. The mission went smoothly without any German opposition. The bombers hit their target and returned safely. It was uneventful, but it established operational procedures. The 332nd learned to coordinate with bomber formations, how to position their squadrons for maximum defense, and how to communicate with bomber leaders during missions. The real test came the following day, June 9, 1944. Davis led the group on their second escort mission, this time targeting Munich, Germany, a heavily defended city deep in enemy territory. Intelligence predicted more than 100 German fighters could be expected to intercept them. The Luftwaffe had a strong presence in southern Germany, and they would surely contest any daylight raid on Munich. The 332nd launched 39 P-47s from Ramitelli, and the mission was designed to have the fighters rendezvous with the bombers over the Adriatic Sea, escort them across northern Italy and into Germany, provide protection over the target, and escort them back to a rally point. The formation assembled smoothly. The B-24 Liberators from the 5th Bombardment Wing flew in tight box formations with multiple groups stacked vertically, each offset horizontally to avoid collisions and to maximize the effectiveness of defensive fire from their machine guns. The 332nd positioned its squadrons around the bomber stream, with some flying high and to the sides, some slightly ahead to intercept approaching fighters, and some flying behind and below to cover the vulnerable angles. As the formation crossed the Alps and entered German airspace, the Luftwaffe was ready to meet them. Over Udine in northeastern Italy, radar stations detected the incoming formation and German fighters were scrambled. The experienced Luftwaffe pilots, many with years of combat experience, attacked from multiple directions. Some came from high altitude, diving through the formation to gain speed. Others attacked from the sides, aiming to catch bombers at the edges where defensive fire was weaker. Some attacked from below, where the bomber gunners had limited fields of fire. The German assault was well coordinated, professional, and dangerous. Davis issued the order, "Engage." The Red Tails went into action. Second Lieutenant Clarence Allen spotted a Messerschmitt 109 diving toward the bombers. He quickly rolled his P-47 into pursuit, closed in, and fired his .50 caliber machine guns. The German aircraft exploded and fell away trailing smoke. Allen did not pursue. He pulled up and returned to his position, covering the bombers. First Lieutenant Melvin Jackson engaged another Messerschmitt approaching from the side. Jackson, one of the veterans from the early Tuskegee classes with combat experience in North Africa and Sicily, fired on the enemy aircraft, causing it to break off and dive away. Jackson confirmed the kill. First Lieutenant Wendell Pute, known for his aggression and skill, engaged a Messerschmitt head-on, a tactic requiring precision and nerve. Both aircraft exchanged gunfire at a combined speed of over 600 miles per hour. Pute's shots hit first, and the German plane exploded. He flew through the debris cloud and immediately began searching for his next target, but always keeping track of the bombers. He did not chase the fleeing German aircraft away from his assigned position. First Lieutenant Charles Busy shot down another Messerschmitt, while Second Lieutenant Frederick Thunderberg destroyed 2 more, bringing the day's total to 5 confirmed kills. This was the 332nd Fighter Group's first success in bomber escort operations. The pilots had proven their ability to fight, but Davis's tactical doctrine also showed its worth. Throughout the engagement, the Red Tails maintained their positions relative to the bombers. When they engaged German fighters, they did so because those fighters were attacking the bombers. Once they scored their kills, the pilots immediately returned to their defensive positions. They did not pursue German aircraft that broke off their attacks and fled toward German bases. While some German fighters escaped, the mission's success proved the effectiveness of the 332nd's disciplined approach to bomber protection. Had been killed if the 332nd had pursued the German fighters, but thanks to their disciplined approach, the bombers remained protected throughout the mission. However, 2 B-24 Liberators from the 459th Bombardment Group were shot down by German fighters that managed to get past the defensive screen. 60 men were aboard those bombers. Some may have survived and become prisoners of war, while others likely perished. Despite the intensity of the German attacks and the number of enemy fighters involved, the losses were relatively light. Without fighter escorts, the bomber losses would have been much higher. The June 9th mission proved that staying with the bombers was effective. The Red Tails continued escorting bombers throughout the summer. On July 12, 1944, they escorted B-24s to Nimes, France. German Focke-Wulf 190s attacked from above. 3 bombers from the 461st Bombardment Group were shot down. But the Red Tails prevented heavier losses by maintaining their defensive positions. Then came July 18, 1944. The mission was to escort B-17S from the 5th Bombardment Wing to Meigen, Germany. Intelligence indicated heavy resistance. The 332nd launched 61 P-51 Mustangs, having just transitioned to the faster, longer-range Mustang earlier in July. The red tail markings from the P-47S were now on the new aircraft as they flew over northern Italy and southern Germany. Around 100 to 150 German fighters attacked the formation in waves. Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s came from multiple directions and altitudes, trying to break up the bomber formations. The Red Tails engaged continuously, but the German attack was overwhelming. The air battle lasted nearly an hour, and 15 bombers were shot down, 14 B-17s from the 483rd Bombardment Group and 1 from the 3001st Bombardment Group. The Red Tails fought hard that day, shooting down 12 German aircraft, their highest single-day total of the war. First Lieutenant Lee Archer destroyed a Messerschmitt 109, and Captain Joseph Elberry got another. Multiple pilots earned aerial victory credits, but the overwhelming number of German fighters made it impossible to prevent all losses. Without the Red Tails' discipline in staying with the formations, the bomber casualties would have been catastrophic. Word quickly spread throughout the 5th, 10th, Air Force bomber groups about the Red Tails' unique approach to escort duty. Unlike other fighter groups, the Red Tails stayed in position and did not chase enemy fighters away from the bomber formations. Several bomber pilots observing the July 18th engagement noted the tactical discipline. The Red Tails were taking a different approach to escort duty. On August 24, 1944, First Lieutenant Charles McGee, flying with the 3002nd Fighter Squadron, engaged German fighters while escorting B-17s to Partibus Airfield in Czechoslovakia. German Focke-Wulf 190s attempted to penetrate the bomber formation. McGee followed one of the German fighters into a dive, stayed behind it, fired a sustained burst, and watched it crash. He immediately climbed back to rejoin the bomber formation, not pursuing further targets and returning to his assigned position. This pattern of discipline was consistent across missions. The Red Tails engaged German fighters threatening the formations and then immediately returned to their positions. They did not chase enemy aircraft beyond the immediate threat. This tactical discipline resulted in fewer aerial victories compared to other fighter groups, but it led to fewer bomber losses. By autumn 1944, the statistics confirmed the success of their approach. The 5th Air Force flew bombers and fighters from different bases, with little personal interaction between the two groups. Escort assignments came on a rotation basis, and bomber crews rarely met their fighter escorts face to face, but they could identify the different fighter groups by their distinctive tail markings. The 332nd had solid red tails, the 31st Fighter Group had red and white striped tails. The 52nd Fighter Group had yellow tails, and the 325th Fighter Group had black and yellow checkerboard tails. These markings helped bomber crews and fighter pilots quickly identify friend from foe in large formations. Some bomber crews began calling the 332nd the Red-Tailed Angels. The nickname appeared in period sources and accounts. Whether bomber crews specifically requested the Red Tails as escorts is difficult to verify, but one documented exception occurred on December 29, 1944, when 18 B-24 Liberators were forced by bad weather to land at Ramitelli Airfield, the Red Tails' home base. 17 bombers came from the 485th Bombardment Group, and one came from the 455th Bombardment Group. The bomber crews spent 5 days with the Tuskegee Airmen, sharing meals and facilities at the crowded base. During this time, the 332nd left notes in each bomber explaining that the red-tailed escorts were there to protect them on their missions. The bomber crews from the 485th and 455th groups would have gained personal knowledge of the Red Tails after that experience. Meanwhile, German intelligence reports from late summer and autumn 1944 noted changes in American escort tactics. Luftwaffe after-action reports mentioned that certain P-51 groups with distinctive markings were staying closer to bomber formations and were more difficult to draw away from their positions. The reports did not always specify which groups, but German pilots observed that tactics that had worked earlier in the war were becoming less effective against some American escorts. The statistics confirmed these observations. The 332nd Fighter Group flew 179 bomber escort missions and proved their effectiveness in defending bombers and maintaining discipline, which ultimately saved countless lives. The 332nd Fighter Group flew numerous escort missions for the 5th Air Force between early June 1944 and late April 1945. During this time, they lost bombers to enemy aircraft on only 7 occasions. The total number of bombers shot down by German fighters while under Red Tail escort was 27. The dates of these losses were June 9th, June 13th, July 12th, July 18th, July 20th in 1944, and March 24, 1945. Meanwhile, the three other P-51 Mustang fighter groups in the 5th 10th Air Force, the 31st, 52nd, and 325th each lost an average of 46 bombers to enemy fighters during the same period. The Red Tails lost significantly fewer bombers, thanks to their tactical discipline. Their approach was to stay with the bombers, ensuring their protection, even if it meant shooting down fewer enemy aircraft compared to other fighter groups. The 332nd was credited with 112 aerial victories during the war. Other groups had more kills because they aggressively chased German fighters, but the Red Tails focused on bomber protection, not producing aces. No pilot in the 332nd reached the 5 confirmed kills needed to be considered an ace, though Lieutenant Colonel Lee Archer came closest with 4 confirmed kills. His 5th claim has been disputed for decades. But the Red Tails were not focused on producing aces. Their goal was to bring bombers home safely, and in that respect, they succeeded better than any other fighter group in the theater. On March 24, 1945, the 5th 10th Air Force flew its longest and most dangerous escort mission of the war. The target was the Daimler-Benz tank factory in Berlin with a 1,600-mile round trip. 5 fighter groups were assigned to escort the bombers. The 332nd launched P-51 Mustangs from Ramitelli, led by Colonel Davis himself. The exact number of participating aircraft varies, with reports indicating between 43 and 59 planes. As the bomber formation approached Berlin, German fighters rose to meet them. The Luftwaffe sent everything available, including propeller-driven Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s, followed by around 24 to 30 Messerschmitt 262 jet fighters. The Me-262 was the fastest operational aircraft in the world, capable of speeds exceeding 540 miles per hour, more than 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. These jets were nearly impossible to catch in level flight. However, they had one vulnerability. They were less maneuverable than conventional fighters. In a turning fight, a skilled Mustang pilot could force a jet into a disadvantageous position. 3 Red-Tail pilots succeeded in downing German jets that day. First Lieutenant Roscoe Brown of the 100th Fighter Squadron engaged a Messerschmitt Me-262. He forced the jet into a turn, got inside its turning radius, and fired a sustained burst that hit the jet's engines, causing it to explode. The pilot, Oberleutnant Franz Kulp, a German ace with 10 confirmed victories, bailed out but survived. Second Lieutenant Charles Brantley of the 100th Fighter Squadron shot down another Me-262, killing the German pilot, Oberleutnant Ernst Werner. First Lieutenant Earl Lane, also of the 100th Fighter Squadron, destroyed a third Me-262, and the pilot, Feldwebel Erwin, survived and was captured. 3 German jets were destroyed in one mission, a significant engagement between the Tuskegee Airmen and the Luftwaffe's newest technology. However, the mission came at a cost. 3 bombers were shot down by German fighters during the engagement. Despite this, the Daimler-Benz factory was heavily damaged by the bombing raid, but men died to achieve that result. The 332nd Fighter Group was never officially recognized during the war for its superior bomber protection record. They earned 3 Distinguished Unit Citations, 1 for operations over Sicily in May and June 1943, 1 for actions at Monastery Hill near Cassino in May 1944, and 1 for successfully fighting off German jet aircraft on March 24, 1945. However, there was no specific commendation for their bomber escort record. In March 1945, 2 publications helped create a myth that would persist for decades. On March 10, 1945, Liberty magazine published an article by Roy Ottley titled "Dark Angels of Doom," claiming the Tuskegee Airmen had not lost a bomber in more than 100 missions. 2 weeks later, on March 24, 1945, the Chicago Defender newspaper published an article stating that the 332nd had flown its 200th mission without losing a single bomber to enemy fighters. This claim was based on incomplete information provided by the 15th Air Force Public Affairs Office and was not accurate. In reality, 7 bombers had been shot down by German fighters during Red Tail escort missions on 7 different occasions. However, the myth took hold, and for decades, the claim that the Red Tails had never lost a bomber was repeated in books, articles, films, and museum exhibits, becoming a key part of the Tuskegee Airmen legend. Many people, including some Tuskegee Airmen themselves, came to believe this myth. The statement was not publicly challenged for many years, as mission reports were classified after the war and few had access to primary documents. In the 1990s, Dr. Alan Groman interviewed General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. and specifically asked him if the claim was true. Davis acknowledged that he questioned the statement, but explained that it had been repeated so many times that people began to believe it. Davis himself knew the statement was not entirely accurate, as his own Distinguished Flying Cross citation from June 9, 1944, specifically noted that despite the large number of enemy fighters, the bomber formation suffered only a few losses, not 0 losses, but a few. It wasn't until 2007 that the Air Force officially corrected the record and clarified the truth about the 332nd's bomber escort missions. The Historical Research Agency released a comprehensive report that definitively disproved the myth that the 332nd Fighter Group never lost a bomber while providing escort. Dr. Daniel Hallman, the agency's chief historian, carefully examined mission reports from both the 332nd and the bombardment groups they escorted. He reviewed missing aircrew reports documenting which aircraft were lost, when and where they went down, and how they were destroyed. Dr. Hallman cross-referenced this data with German fighter pilot claims. In his article published in the Alabama Review in January 2011, he documented exactly which bombers were lost on which dates while under Tuskegee Airmen escort. His research confirmed that the Tuskegee Airmen had the best bomber protection record of any fighter escort group in the Mediterranean theater, despite the myth that they never lost a bomber. Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. continued his military career after World War II. In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, desegregating the United States Armed Forces, and Davis helped draft the Air Force's desegregation plan. He commanded fighter wings during the Korean War, flying F-86 Sabres in combat, and continued to rise through the ranks. In 1954, Davis became the Air Force's first black brigadier general, followed by his promotion to Major General in 1959 and Lieutenant General in 1965. Davis retired in 1970 after 33 years of service. In December 1998, President Bill Clinton promoted Davis to 4-star general, making him the first black officer to receive that rank in retirement. Davis passed away on July 4, 2002, at age 89 and was buried at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 2, alongside his father, Charles McGee, who shot down a Focke-Wulf 190 in August 1944. Also remained in the Air Force. He flew 409 combat missions across 3 wars, including in Korea and Vietnam, and became one of the most decorated pilots in American history. McGee passed away on January 16, 2022, at age 102. In his later years, he traveled constantly, speaking at schools, air shows, and military bases. sharing the story of the Tuskegee Airmen with new generations. He always emphasized the same lesson Davis had taught: discipline over glory, duty over personal achievement, and the mission of bringing the people you are protecting home safely. Roscoe Brown, who shot down a Me-262 jet over Berlin, earned a Distinguished Flying Cross for his actions. After the war, Brown earned a doctorate in education, became president of Bronx Community College in New York, and spent decades advocating for educational opportunities. He passed away in July 2016 at age 94. In his later years, he gave hundreds of interviews about his experiences, often stating that the most important aspect of the Tuskegee Airmen was not that there were black pilots, but that they did their job better than anyone else. Lee Archer, whose fifth aerial victory was disputed and never officially confirmed, remained in the Air Force until 1970. He later worked in corporate America and became a venture capitalist, helping create opportunities for black businesses. Archer remained active with Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, the veterans organization, until his death in January 2010 at age 90. Archer always maintained that he shot down 5 enemy aircraft, making him the only black ace of World War II, though the Air Force never officially confirmed the 5th kill. Regardless, Archer's legacy is about more than the number of kills. It's about his role in staying with the bombers and bringing them home. In 2015, the United States Military Academy at West Point announced that a new cadet barracks would be named Davis Barracks in honor of Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., the academy that had once silenced him for 4 years as a cadet now honored him with one of its largest buildings. In 2019, the United States Air Force Academy named its airfield Davis Airfield in his honor. These recognitions came long after his death, but they represented institutional acknowledgement of his achievements and his transformative role in American military culture. The Tuskegee Airmen story is often told through the lens of race, but it's also a story about mission focus, tactical discipline, and choosing collective success over individual recognition. The Red Tails faced a choice that many organizations face: pursue metrics that benefit individuals or pursue metrics that benefit the mission. They chose the mission. They stayed with the bombers. While other groups chased kills, they protected the formations. When other groups sought glory, they brought people home. This choice cost them aerial victories and ace status, but it earned them something more valuable: the best bomber escort record in the theater. They earned the trust of the men they protected and proved they could perform at the highest level. Despite a system designed to prevent them from doing so, the distinctive red tails became more than identification markings. They symbolized reliability, discipline, and protection. For bomber crews flying through flak and enemy fighters over Germany, Austria, and Romania, seeing those red tails meant someone was watching over them, someone who would not abandon them and would stay in position no matter what. That promise, that commitment to protecting others at personal cost, is what the Red Tails represented. It wasn't about perfection or myth. It was about something real, measurable, and worthy of remembering. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen teaches us that excellence isn't about flashy heroics or seeking recognition. It's about disciplined commitment to mission success. It's about prioritizing the greater good over personal achievement. The Tuskegee Airmen overcame institutional barriers and changed history by staying focused on their mission while others chased glory. They did it by protecting bombers when others might have pursued enemy fighters. They did it by being better at the job than anyone else, even when the system tried to prevent them from doing the job at all. That is their legacy, a legacy of mission focus, discipline, and excellence under pressure. The myth about the Red Tails never losing a bomber has faded. but the truth of their achievements remains more powerful. They prove that excellence can overcome barriers, and this story is a lesson in perseverance, dedication, and the importance of staying focused on what truly matters.